Okay, let's talk about the processes involved in chemical change. Chemical change tayo ha. So definitely, there is a new substance being formed, and this new substance assumes a new identity. Okay? So the first one is the oxidation. This is very common sa atin na process. Like we can observe things being oxidized, like our fruits after peeling them, just like the apple class is being oxidized. That is why nagba-brown siya. Pero what is oxidation? When you say oxidation, there is the influence of oxygen to your original substance. Okay, so therefore oxygen will react to your chemical. Okay? So there is gain of oxygen, and there are times that there are loss of hydrogen. So either of the two, we call that oxidation. But the most common one, this one, the action of oxygen. There will be chemical union of oxygen to your original substance. So just like this, you have here the magnesium metal, and then there is oxygen. So there will be combination of these two yielding magnesium oxide. Okay, so we call this magnesium oxide ha. So ito yung example of oxygen. And at the same time, there will be increase in the oxidation state. If we look at the chemical equation, automatically we can say, oh, this is oxidation because there is combination of the oxygen to other element. But if we look at it deeper, actually, there is the involvement of the increase in the oxidation state. So you are going to look at their charges. Okay? So, ganito yung pag-check ng charge ha. Number one, if the element is uncombined, again, if the element is not combined to other elements, just like this one, hindi pa siya combined with other elements. Automatically, class, the element assumes a charge or an oxidation state of 0. Okay, 0 yan ha, ang magnesium. That is also true for oxygen. This is also 0, though we have a subscript na 2 here. We call this class a subscript. And when you say subscript, that refers to the number of atoms present in the molecule. Ito namang nandito, ginagawa natin during the balancing, we call this coefficient. And coefficient represents the number of molecules. Okay? So just like this one, we have 2 molecules of magnesium. Okay? And then this one, we have, pag walang number, automatic, that's 1. So we have 1 molecule of oxygen. But in the case of oxygen, you have 2 atoms being combined. So bakit may 2 si oxygen? Class, meron tayong tinatawag na diatomic molecules. Diatomic molecules. When you say diatomic molecules, these elements do not exist in nature as one atom only. Hindi kagaya ng magnesium na pwede siyang mag-stand alone as magnesium lang. Itong mga elements na ito, kailangan partner talaga sila. Okay? Hindi pwede na oxygen-oxygen lang. Isang oxygen. So ano yung mga diatomic molecules natin? We abbreviate this as BSPh. Para madali nating tandaan ha. BSPh yung ating mga diatomic elements. So you will see them in chemical equations wherein there are times that they are not combined to other elements but they exist as diatomic molecules. So ano ito? We have the bromine, iodine. This one is chlorine. This is not carbon. So again, this is chlorine. We have hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and chlorine. So as you can see, oxygen is included here. So mag-e-exist siya as diatomic molecule. But since, just like magnesium, it is not combined to other elements, the charge or the oxidation state for oxygen here is 0. Okay? Therefore, when you say 0, if you can still remember our laboratory, though that the group B no is wala doon, but pag sinabing class, 0 yung charge ng element, meaning yan, you have the same protons and electrons. Mag-a-assume lang yan siya ng charge if mabawasan or madagdagan yung charge niya. So ito, 0 lang sila. Kailan magiging 0? Kapag they are not combined with other elements. So, if there is now the reaction of magnesium plus oxygen, that's the time you have the product called magnesium oxide. Okay? Magnesium oxide. And then let's see what happened here. Kapag ang substance class, na-combine na siya with other elements, kagaya nito, magnesium and then oxygen. They are two different elements. That's the time they assume a charge. And then last time, I also taught you how to identify the charge of these elements. Diba? Sabi ko, you have to look at their position in the periodic table. So the group where they belong in the periodic table will be their charge. Again, use that if these elements combine with other elements para mag-form ng compound. So if I'm going to ask you, what will be the charge of magnesium now? Ano yung magiging charge ng magnesium? Anyone? Please take out your periodic table so that you can check it.
Positive, ma'am.
Ano? Sorry?
Positive po.
Positive what? Positive?
2.
Positive 2, ma'am.
Okay, very good. Positive 2. So if you look at your periodic table class, magnesium belongs to group 2 in the periodic table. And that means na ang charge niya ay positive 2. How about oxygen?
Negative.
Negative?
2.
Negative 2, ma'am.
Okay, very good. Negative 2. So yan na yung charge nila ngayon when they combine to form the compound magnesium oxide. So always remember, for a compound, the sum, okay, if we are going to add the positive and the negative charge, this will always be equal to 0. If pag-add natin class, hindi siya equal to 0, it means mali yung inyong chemical formula for that compound. So you can always check that. So ito na ngayon yung charge ng elements if they are combined together. So ngayon, kung titingnan natin class, there is oxidation in this part. In which part? This one, magnesium. Bakit? Magnesium from 0 assumed an oxidation state of positive 2. So this is where the increase in the oxidation state happened. So ayan na yung tinatawag natin na oxidation. Na-oxidize siya, nag-increase yung kanyang oxidation state. That is different from oxygen though, kasi oxygen from 0, bumaba yung kanyang oxidation state, naging negative 2. So again, ito yung tinatawag natin here na oxidation sa part ng ating magnesium. And by the way, let me just, tell you also na itong oxygen na bumaba yung kanyang oxidation state, ang tawag natin dyan, reduction. Okay? Reduction ang tawag natin. So ito yung, I don't know if you heard about this, but ito yung tinatawag na redox. Okay, redox kasi there is reduction and at the same time oxidation in one chemical equation. Actually, one cannot exist without the other. If there is a substance being oxidized, there will always be another substance being reduced. So that is why we call it redox. So if this happen, there is class A chemical reaction. Okay, may chemical reaction kapag ganyan, may na-oxidize and may na-reduce. Okay? Do you have questions or clarifications? Wala. Sige. So yung reduction naman, ito na yung kabaliktaran ng ating oxidation reaction. Murag tongue twister. So sa reduction class, there is class removal of oxygen from the compound. Kung sa oxidation, mayroong addition ng oxygen. This time, if we remove oxygen, we call that a reduction. Or if we add hydrogen in the compound, reduction pa rin ang tawag nun. Okay? And nakita nyo kanina, in the case of oxygen, from 0, it becomes -2. There is a decrease in the oxidation state. Yung charge nag-decrease. Okay? So yan yung tinatawag natin na redox reaction. Sige. Now, another thing, when you say neutralization, this is the #1 question during our board exam. I took the board exam January 2013. I can still remember. This is the only question that I can still remember. The #1 question sa board exam. What are the products of the reactions of acids and bases? It's salt and water. Okay, salt and water, and the process is called neutralization. Again, if we react an acid and a base, it will always be forming salt and water. So the salt here is not necessarily the table salt na sodium chloride ha. Anything class that is not an acid or a base for our compounds are called salt. But in this case, talagang table salt yung nangyari. We're going to combine hydrochloric acid and sodium hydroxide. We will get sodium chloride and water. Okay? So yan yung tinatawag na neutralization reaction. So in the case of our body, diba, there are people who experience hyperacidity in their stomach. What do we give this patients experiencing hyperacidity? Anong alam yung gamot na binibigay pag nagha-hyperacidity? Masyadong marami ang acid sa stomach. Yung iba sa dami ng acid, yung iba nagre-reflux na. We call that gastroesophageal reflux disease or GERD. Pero in layman's term, we call that heartburn. Kung Kreml S. Okay, very good. Kreml S yung isa sa binibigay natin. Marami sila, of course. But Kreml S is a brand name. So the generic name for our Kreml S is magnesium hydroxide plus aluminum hydroxide plus the simethicone. So therefore, Kreml S is a combination drug. We give this to hyperacidity. So remember, in our stomach, we have this one class. This is the acid found in our stomach, the hydrochloric acid. This is found in our gastric juice. If we have a lot of this, then we can experience hyperacidity. Now, how do we treat hyperacidity? Through neutralization reaction. So we will be giving basic substances. So these are the examples of basic substances: magnesium hydroxide and aluminum hydroxide. Mga basic substances ito. Mga base or alkaline. So parehas lang yung base and alkaline ha, basic or alkaline. So when it reacts with acid, it will form a salt and water. Okay, so example, magnesium hydroxide. This is the chemical formula of magnesium hydroxide plus the acid. This will form magnesium chloride plus water. Okay, so this one is the salt. Syempre, this one is the water. Okay, however, basi mautan na mo, what is simethicone, ma'am? This water is sometimes in the form of gas. So magiging vapor, vapor siya or water vapor or gas. Now this will cause flatulence. Are you familiar with flatulence? What do you mean by flatulence? Anyone who knows what flatulence is? Flatulence is butod. Sa Bisaya pa ka nang ibuturan bitaw ka when you're going to tap your stomach, murag na drum, meaning na ay hangin sa sulod. In short, na ay hangin sa sulod, that's flatulence ha. Sakit ang tiyan mo kay nabuturan ka, ana. So itong dinagdag nila class is called an anti-flatulent agent. Okay? To counteract the released vapor or gas. So kompleto na siya para hindi mag-suffer yung patient natin na 'di ba nag-hyperacidity siya, masakit yung tiyan niya. So i-treat natin yung hyperacidity niya. Now baka hindi mawala yung sakit ng tiyan kasi napalitan naman nito. Kasi dahil sa na-form na water. So kaya dinagdagan siya ng simethicone, which is an anti-flatulent agent. Okay? So I hope that's clear. Anyway, this one is an example of a neutralization reaction. And we have the so-called hydrolysis. So sa hydrolysis naman is the vice or the vice versa of our neutralization. So as you can see, when you say hydrolysis, water reacts with salt and what is formed? Acid and base. So talagang kabaliktaran siya ng neutralization. Remember kanina sa neutralization, acid plus base will yield salt and water. This time, salt and water will react with each other, forming acid and a base. Yan yung kabaliktaran. Ang tawag ay hydrolysis. Okay? So you will encounter hydrolysis more on, example, biopharmaceutics na subject. Kasi itong hydrolysis is one reason why our drug products in the market can be degraded or destroyed pag nagkaroon na ng hydrolysis. Pag nalagyan ng tubig yung gamot natin, hindi pa natin nainuman, nasa pharmacy pa lang. Pag nalagyan yan siya ng tubig, mag-hydrolyze yan siya. So, masisira yung gamot, hindi mo na siya pwedeng inumin. Okay, so that's one process of product degradation. And we have this saponification. From the name itself, saponification, the goal here for the chemical reaction is to produce the soap. Okay, so you will have an experiment for this, I think, in your organic chemistry in your second year, that you will be taught on how to make a soap. Okay? So, gagawa kayo ng sarili ninyong sabon. And how do we do that? This is just a reaction between an alkali. When you say alkali, that's a basic substance, and our fats or oil. Okay? So, ayun yung magre-react. A basic or an alkaline substance plus either fat fats or oil. Again, ang mabubuo niyan ay soap and glycerol. That is how they make soap class. Bath soap. Pwedeng liquid, pwedeng hard soap. Actually, depending on the basic substance being used. So pag ang ginamit na basic substance is sodium hydroxide, pinareact mo dito sa fats or oils, you will have the hard soap. Oops, wait. Ang sabon na itong ginagamit, parehas anang safeguard, di ba gahi? Pero if we want to produce the liquid soap natin, we're going to use potassium hydroxide. React pa rin natin sa fats and oils. Again, we will have liquid soap for this. That's saponification. So, nakatry akong gumawa ng soap using lard, yung fat ng baka, and then lalagyan siya ng sodium hydroxide. Ayan yung nabuong soap na talaga. Pwede din namang oil yung gamitin. Kagaya ng Palmolive. Palmolive Plus is a brand name. Pero that is actually a combination of palm oil and olive oil. Kaya nga siya tinawag na Palmolive. Okay? Ayan, palm oil plus olive oil, tapos dinagdagan plus ng alkali substance, kaya nabuo yung soap nila. So since dalawang klaseng oil yung ginamit, kaya siya dinugtong nila yung pangalan, naging Palmolive na siya. That becomes now the brand name. Okay, but the process is still called saponification. Okay? Questions so far? Kasi nabutas.
Ma'am,
Yes.
pardon po ako sa paano magawa yung hard na soap.
Hard soap. Sige. Yung sa hard soap class, we use this chemical, sodium hydroxide. This is our alkali substance or basic substance. Papareact lang natin siya either sa fats or oils. Depende kasi sa atin anong gagamitin natin. Fats ba or oils. Nevertheless, if we're going to use the sodium hydroxide, we will always produce class A hard soap. Okay? Hard soap ang mapoproduce niyan. Kapag liquid soap naman yung gusto niyong maproduce, we use the potassium hydroxide. This is sodium hydroxide. This is potassium hydroxide. Okay. So, kumusta yung inyong pag-memorize sa periodic table?
Wala pa katunga, ma'am.
Wala pa katunga. Ang pag-asa naman mo. Let me check. Sige, padayon ninyo na inyong pag-memorize ha sa periodic table. The name, the symbol of the elements, and syempre their position in the periodic table. And lastly, we have the so-called fermentation. So I believe you are familiar with this term, fermentation. When you say fermentation, it's the action of a bacteria or other microorganism to an organic substance. When you say organic substance, ano nga yun? Merong carbon. Okay? Wait a minute. I'll just answer this concern. So again, fermentation means there is the action of bacteria or microorganism sa organic substance. Pag sinabing organic substance, meron siyang carbon. And what will be the result of that? Production of alcohol. So in your, I'm not sure if that will be on your second year or in your third year, there is this one subject wherein you will also be taught on how to make wine. Okay, so gagawa din kayo ng sarili nyo wine. Actually, our third year just made their wine. Ang ginawa nila, they used fruit that is not only limited to grapes, ha. Example, you can use banana. Banana contains organic substance there. And then you will have this reacted by microorganism. Actually, this time you will not be using bacteria. Instead, you can use yeast. Okay, so yeast class is one type of a fungi. Okay, or a fungus. So pag nag-react yung yeast doon sa banana, alcohol will be produced. So in the end, you will have a banana wine. Okay? So again, ang tawag dyan sa reaction na yan ay fermentation. Fermentation ang tawag dyan. Okay, questions or clarifications? Wala?
Kanang yeast lang gid ang magamit, ma'am, or pwede parang ibang substances, organic substances, ma'am?
Pwede. Pwedeng. The banana is the organic substance.
Ay, okay.
Ito yung microorganism. Okay. Ito yung microorganism. So sa organic substance, you can use variety of organic substances. So during my college days, yung nagawa ko na wine is, ano bang ginamit naman? Langka. Langka. Tapos, syempre, pina-react siya sa yeast. Most of the time, we use the yeast in the fermentation process. Papareact natin yung yeast dyan sa fruit na yan. Tapos, pagkatapos, magre-release yan siya ng alcohol. So, the alcohol being released is the ethanol. This is the ayupak name, yung talagang name ng ating alcohol. Pero commonly, we call that ethyl alcohol. So it's the same alcohol that we use as disinfectant. But in this case, we can consume it, okay, as wine. So again, you have plus the choice of what fruit are you going to use for the fermentation process. It's just that what we have in the market for our wines are mostly grapes. So grapes yung mostly talaga wine natin sa market. Meron tayong red wine at saka meron tayong white wine. What's the difference between a red wine and a white wine? Kaya difference nun.
Ang color, Ma'am Char.
Yeah, ang color. Bakit kaya different ang color nila? Yung isa red, yung isa hindi red. Parang clear. Ew.
Sa fruit,
white
siguro
kay
nagigamit, Ma'am.
Ang ansa?
ang white
Fruit po.
Ang difference nila, yung red wine, meron pa siyang peel. May panit pa ang grapes. Pag ferment, mana siya na nag-red wine. Tapos pag white wine inyong inumon class, it means na the grapes are being unpeeled. Gikwaan siya og panit. So mao lang na ilahang difference. The peelings class will dictate what color your wine will be. So yun lang. So please remember that also. Low bat. Give me a second, please. I'll just plug my laptop kay low bat. Okay, let us continue. Do you have questions? Before we move on to nuclear change, kasi we are done with our processes involving chemical change class. Wala, nagkaintindihan tayo doon. Oxidation is a chemical change, a chemical reaction. So this fermentation, reduction, hydrolysis, neutralization, and saponification. Next, let's have the nuclear change. Pag ang nucleus talaga yung nag-change class, that's the time how we have nuclear change na nag-take place. So what do you mean by that? Remember yung atom natin class. At the center, we have the so-called nucleus. That is where we get to see the protons and the neutrons. Now, if that is being changed, okay, na-change yung kanyang structure, yung kanyang properties, or even the composition ng nucleus, magre-result yan siya in the transmutation of one element to another element. Okay? Yung nakasanayan kasi natin na chemical reaction class, mga chemical reactions natin, yung nangyari dito is yung sa electrons. 'Di ba? Kung under kayo sa akin sa lab, sabi ko, it can undergo transfer of electrons or sharing of electrons. That is why chemical reactions happen. Pero walang pagbabago sa nucleus noon. Electrons lang yung nag-change, number of electrons. Now, kapag ang nucleus talaga ang nag-change ang properties, ang composition, or ang structure, that's the time we have the nuclear change. And kapag nagkaroon ng nuclear change, ang isang element ay matra-transform into another element. Okay? So just like this one, minsan may reactions tayo involving helium, magko-combine siya with another helium, tapos magkakaroon ng nuclear change, hindi mo na makikita si helium class. This will result in the production of the element. What is Be? What is Be?
Beryllium.
Okay, very good. It's beryllium. So, again, this is an example of a nuclear change. There will be a totally different element that will be formed during the reaction. Unlike, again, sa mga nakasanayan nating chemical equation wherein there is only a transfer or sharing of electrons. So, walang pagbabago doon sa substance natin. Kagaya ng example natin kanina, magnesium plus oxygen yielding magnesium oxide. You still have the magnesium, you still have the oxygen. So there is no new element being formed here. This is just a simple chemical reaction. Ito naman, there is nuclear change. So from helium, it becomes beryllium. And yes, that is possible, again, for nuclear change. Okay, now we have the so-called nuclear fission, wherein a heavy atom, a very big atom, will be split into two. Okay? So, nuclear fission ang tawag dyan. Ang kabaliktaran ng fission ay fusion. Ayun yung nangyari sa helium kanina. These two heliums are small molecules or small atoms, light atoms. And if they are being fused, they are being combined, it will result to a bigger molecule, which is beryllium. So again, yung example na ito ay dito siya under sa nuclear fusion. Pag baliktarin mo siya, beryllium class will be split into two. Ito yung magiging mukha niya. Okay? So always remember that this side of the equation is called the reactant or reactants if marami sila. And this side of the equation, yung product or products. Okay? So I hope that is clear. Baliktarin mo lang siya for the fission. Yung malaking element will be split into two light elements. Okay? Now let's talk about the atomic structure. Do not forget, chemistry is the study of matter. Matter is anything that occupies space and has mass. Now, the basic unit of matter is called the atom. Okay? Again, basic unit of matter. Yan yung ating atom. Gusto ko lang mag-ask, what is the basic unit of life? Basic unit of life. Life.
Cells po, ma'am.
Cells. Very good, ha? Pag sinabing basic unit of life, that's cells. But if we say basic unit of matter, class atom yun, ha? Atom. So let's talk about the atomic structure. For the atomic structure, we have the so-called nucleus at the center. And then again, please do not forget what we can see in the nucleus are the protons and at the same time the electrons. So ito yung ating nucleus here. Again, present there are the neutrons and also the protons. And surrounding the nucleus are orbitals where we get to see our electrons. Okay, so surrounding our nucleus, we have the electron cloud. We have the orbitals. And then there is the high possibility of locating the electrons. Okay, so this is our atomic structure. Ito yung ating basic unit of matter. Now let's go back to history. How did they discover atoms? It started with Democritus. So he was the scientist who said that matter daw is made up of small indivisible particles. So siya yung nagsimula ng pag-study ng atoms. So again, sabi niya, since chemistry is the study of matter, then matter daw is made up of small indivisible particles, which he named atomos. So atom dati ay ang tawag nila ay atomos. He was the one who used that term, atomos. So again, that's the first one. Now, here comes another scientist. We have John Dalton. Sabi niya, matter is made up of atoms, so it's just the same with Democritus. But we have additional information here. All atoms of a given element are alike. Ano ibig sabihin yan? Pag meron kang sodium na element, lahat ng atom ng sodium ay magkapareho. Okay, so all atoms of a given element are alike, magkapareho. Kung meron kang hydrogen, lahat ng atoms ng hydrogen magkapareho. That's according to John Dalton. And it was also John Dalton who stated that atoms can combine with each other to form compounds. Okay? So yung mga atoms daw natin again can join together and form compounds, but they remain unchanged during ordinary chemical reaction. So kagaya ng, again, ating example last time, magnesium can combine with oxygen to form magnesium oxide. Oh, sorry. Let me remove that. It is not included there. The 2 here is the coefficient. Okay? So ito yung chemical. This is an ordinary chemical reaction because the elements involved remain unchanged during the reaction itself. So mag-change lang yan siya again pag merong nuclear change na nangyari. Okay? So again, that's according to John Dalton. And atoms can combine into simple numerical ratio. So just like in the case of water, we have H2O, wherein hydrogen combined with oxygen. And there is a simple ratio nito ha, simple numerical ratio. This is always 2:1. 2 hydrogen will combine with 1 oxygen to form water. Okay? So, hindi yan siya pwedeng magbago kasi pag nagbago yan, hindi na yun water. Pag nagbago yung ratio. Okay? So, pag tinanong kayo who made the billiard ball model ng atomic structure, it was John Dalton. So, he described atom like daw a billiard ball na it is hard but it is indestructible and it's a sphere. So kaya parang billiard ball daw talaga yung atom. But this is being disproved. Hindi daw totoo according to the other scientists kasi yun na yung time na subatomic particles were discovered. Okay? So, na-disprove itong billiard ball model of John Dalton. Okay? By the way, before we'll move on to other scientists, let's talk about the law of definite proportion. So, ito yung sabi ko kanina na when elements join together to form compounds, they always do so in definite composition or proportion. Kaya, pag sinabing water, it is always 2:1. If it becomes 2:2, this is no longer water class. Okay, so how do you call this H2O2? Siyempre, this is water. What is H2O2 again?
Hydrogen peroxide.
Very good. Hydrogen peroxide. So again, we always follow law of definite proportion. Pag nag-form ng compound, we have always a definite proportion of the elements. 2:1 for water. If it changes, like if it becomes 2:2, this is no longer water. Instead, we call it hydrogen peroxide or commonly known as agua oxigenada, which we use as antiseptic. Okay? Sige, sabi ko last time, no, antiseptic are, ano nga yun? Substances that can kill or prevent the growth of microorganisms in living tissues. So kung nasugatan ka, you can use hydrogen peroxide. So that is different from a disinfectant because disinfectant are used for non-living things. Like if you want to clean your desk, you can use a disinfectant. Example, the Lysol. Now we have J.J. Thomson. This is another name who contributed to the discovery of our atoms. So si J.J. Thomson naman, yung model niya for our atoms is yung raisin bread or plum pudding model. So according to him daw, our atom is like a bread with raisins. Tara man tayo ng bread na may raisins, diba? So ganito yung model niya. Raisin bread or plum pudding model. Merong raisin on top. And another one, we have Rutherford Goldfield experiment. His name is Ernest John Rutherford. Yan yung full name niya ha. So anong ginawa niya? He did the gold film experiment. And anong nangyari sa kanyang gold film experiment? Meron siyang gold film dito. Meron daw siyang gold film. And sa gold film class, gumamit siya ng light. So, wala lang, mura flashlight lang. And then, nung inilawan niya na yung gold film, ano yung kanyang observation? 99% of the light passed through the gold film. And there was 1% of this light na-deflect. Okay? So, na-deflect. Bumalik. 1% only. The rest, 99% nakapass through sa kanyang gold field. Ayan yung experiment ni Ernest John Rutherford. And ano yung kanyang conclusion for his experiment? Sabi niya, atoms daw is mostly an empty space. That is why 99% of the light pass through. And itong 1% of light na na-deflect, ito daw yung positive particles that is concentrated in the nucleus. So ito yung pagka-discover ng nucleus and pagka-discover ng protons na nasa loob ng nucleus. So ayun daw yung 1% na na-deflect. Okay? Questions? So far, kaya pa? Kaya pa ang information? Tell me if I'm being fast with my discussion, ha? Para mag-slow down tayo. Okay? So again, that was Ernest John Rutherford. Now we have Niels Bohr. We have the so-called planetary model. Okay? So planetary model daw. So our atom daw has a nucleus just like the sun, which is surrounded by the planets. So the planets, di ba, has orbitals kung saan sila nag-orbit. So ganito daw yung structure ng ating atom according to Niels Bohr. And we have Erwin Schrödinger who discovered the electron cloud. So outside the nucleus, that is where we get to see the electron clouds, and they move in 3D structures, meaning they have orbitals. Okay? So to summarize, for the theories on our atom, everything started with Democritus when he coined the term atomos. And then, si John Dalton naman was the one who made the billiard ball model for our atoms. Okay? And then, for J.J. Thomson, it was called raisin bread model. His name is Joseph John Thomson. And then, Ernest Rutherford did the gold film experiment. So, by the way, J.J. Thomson class discovered the electrons. The raisins there are the electrons. This is a board exam question. And who discovered protons? It was Ernest John Rutherford. And then let us add, since we have the third subatomic particle, the neutron, which has no charge, was discovered by James Chadwick. Okay, his name was James Chadwick. So please take note na lang. Okay, questions or let's take a little break first. Stretching, CR break, water break for the record. Okay, let's talk about ions. So do not forget, ions class are charged atom. Okay? Yung magnesium kanina na 0, elements lang talaga yon, uncharged atom. Pero pag nag-charge, pag nagkaroon na siya ng charge, ion na yung tawag natin. Now, we have two types of charged atom or ions. We have the cations and the anion. So when you hear the word cation, do not forget these are positively charged ions. So the T here for the cation should give you a hint na these are the positive ones. Therefore, if these are the positive ones, so definitely anions are the negatively charged atoms. Okay? So what are the examples of our cations? Our metals, all our metals are cations, meaning they assume positive charges. Sodium, potassium, magnesium, aluminum, these are all cations. Okay, again, they have positive charges. Now, how about the anions? Most of our, our non-metals actually, our non-metals are anions class. What are the examples for this? We have the fluorine, the chlorine. If I don't put plus a number automatic, that's 1/2. Oxygen is another one. Nitrogen is also an anion kasi negatively charged sila. So do not forget when you look at the periodic table, okay, so this part here, we have our nonmetals and they are negatively charged. So all the others are positively charged, so they are cation. So positive to itong transition metals na nasa gitna. Okay? Let me check if I have a periodic table here. Let me show it sa inyo para klaro-klaro tayo with our anions and cations. This one. So we have plus here. These are our metals here. Mga metals yan silang lahat. Sinalibat ko ha. Let me check. No, hindi kasali si. Wait, let me delete. Okay. So lahat ito sila going there except for hydrogen of course. They're all metals, so definitely mga cations ito sila. Okay? And lahat going there including our though our metalloids, some of our metalloids are cations. So depende yun siya sa metalloids, but our non-metals are anions. Okay? Pero mga positively charged itong lahat dito. And going to the right are anions. They are negatively charged. So we have a lot more cations than our anions. Okay? Now for the atomic structure, let's use na lang uniformly this one. Let's have the mass number or the atomic number at the top. And then do not forget, during our laboratory time, I taught you this. When you say mass number or atomic number, or not atomic number, atomic weight or atomic mass, this represents the number of protons and the number of neutrons. Our symbol for atomic weight or the mass number is A. And if you're confused, just remember that our mass number is larger than our atomic number. Kasi ang nire-represent nito, dalawa, number of protons and number of neutrons. While yung nasa ilalim, the atomic number, number of protons lang ang nire-represent. So our symbol for that is Z. Okay? So again, do not forget ha, atomic number represents the number of protons. And for our uncharged element, this is always true. The number of protons is always equal to the number of electrons. Okay? So in the case of calcium, let's use this na lang para uniform tayo. Sa taas natin ilalagay si mass number or si atomic number. So itong 20 sa baba, ito yung tinatawag na atomic number, which means that this element has 20 protons. And since as you can see, walang charge, pag walang charge, we also have the same number for our electrons. Pag nagkaroon ng charge, that's the time mag-iiba yung number of electrons. Pero hindi nag-change ang number ng protons ha. Kasi pag nag-change ang number of protons, ang tawag natin dyan, nuclear change. Mag-iiba din yung element. So pag merong charge involved or changes sa charge, that is because of the electrons. Okay? Sige. Here, the drawings or the writings on the screen. Now, how about the mass number? Do not be confused, ha? Other name for our mass number. We have atomic mass, or we can also call this atomic weight. Okay? Atomic weight or atomic mass kasi compared to electrons, protons are actually heavier as well as neutrons. They are heavier. So they account mostly for the mass of the atom itself. Kaya tinawag itong mass number or atomic weight. So dalawa yan ha, protons and neutrons, both subatomic particles are found in the nucleus. Okay? So this one is larger. So again, in the case of calcium, this one is the mass number. So if it has 20 protons, 20 electrons, since walang charge dyan, anong naiwan? Anong ginagawa natin? Nagma-minus tayo. We subtract 40 minus 20. Atomic mass minus atomic number, that's the time we get the number of neutrons. So in the case of calcium again, we have the same numbers for all subatomic particles. Okay? Now let's define some terminologies involved in atomic structure. When you hear the word isotopes, it means it's the same element. Okay? Again, pag sinabing isotope, the same element yun. So the same ang number of protons. Pero what's the difference? They have different mass number or they have different atomic weight or atomic mass. Let me give you class an example sa ating isotopes. We have hydrogen. Okay? Meron tayong tinatawag na protium, deuterium, and tritium. Okay? Sa hydrogen natin, meron tayong tinatawag na protium, deuterium, and tritium. Lahat sila class hydrogen. So they are the same element. So when it comes to protons, syempre they have the same protons. 1. Bakit 1? Kasi ang atomic number ng hydrogen ay 1. Okay? So ano yung pinagkaiba? Yung mass number nila. Yung atomic mass mismo. Bakit? Yung atomic mass ng protium ay 1. Ito naman 2 and ito 3. Bakit? Kasi magkaiba sila ng number of neutrons. Okay? As is kasi yung protons nila. Pero si protium kasi wala siyang neutron. Kaya yung mass number niya remains 1. Si deuterium naman merong isang neutron. So 1 plus 1 kaya naging 2 ang mass number. And kasunod lang ito. Si tritium ay merong 2 neutrons kaya ang mass number niya ay naging 3. So silang lahat ay hydrogen pero they have different number of neutrons and thus different number of a different mass number. So itong si protium class, ito yung normal hydrogen that we get to see or we get to observe with example water, H2O. Itong hydrogen dito is actually the protium. Okay? Kasi normal hydrogen, merong isang protons, walang neutrons. Si deuterium class, ito yung tinatawag na heavy hydrogen. Heavy hydrogen siya kasi meron siyang dagdag na neutron. So when it becomes water, this becomes B2O. Okay? So ang tawag sa B2O class, heavy water. And yes, nag-e-exist ito. Example sa dagat, sa deep, as in deep sea, nandoon makikita si heavy water. Merong dito, aside from H2O, may B2O na nag-e-exist dyan. Question, can we drink that? Yes, in small amount. but not in very large amount. Again, this is heavy water or heavy hydrogen. Yung hindi talaga natin pwedeng i-consume na isotope of water is the tritium because this is radioactive hydrogen. What do you mean by radioactive? Nag-e-emit ng radiation. Okay? So again, ito yung type of hydrogen or isotope of hydrogen that we should not consume because it's radioactive. So the difference lies on the number of neutrons. So again, ang tawag natin dyan, isotopes. Okay? Ay, isotopes. Mitingin kasi ako sa isotones. Now, what is isotones? N for neutrons. What's their similarity? They have the same neutrons, but they have different protons, which means different element ito sila. Okay? So, for example, we have class, what's the periodic table? Wait lang ha, let me check. Let me check our periodic table. Okay. Let's have the helium. Si helium class, this is 4,2, meaning si helium ay may dalawang protons, dalawang electrons, and dalawang neutron. Kung titingnan natin class yung tritium kanina, si tritium class ay merong isang proton, isang electron, and ilan nga yung neutron ng ating tritium? Sinulat ko yun kanina. Ilan nga yun? Neutrons ng ating tritium. Dalawa.
Dalawa po, ma'am.
Okay. So as you can see class, pareho sila ni helium na may dalawang neutrons. Pero magkaiba yung number of protons nila. Ang tawag natin dyan, isotones. Okay? Isotones ang tawag natin dyan. It can be different proton or different element ha. How about isobar? They are still different element, pero they have the same mass number. Okay? Pag mass number ang magkapareho pero different element, isobar yun. Kung neutrons lang, hindi naman necessarily na the same mass number. Neutrons lang talaga ang magkapareha, isotones. Pag mass number na talaga, isobar. Yan yung tawag natin. Okay? Different element ha, different element. Ang magkapareho lang na element, itong isotopes. Magkaiba sila ng mass number. And then pag sinabing isomer, isomer means the same molecule but they don't have the same structure. Okay? So, example of our isomer, wait ha, yan po kayo ng example of our isomer. Hirap mag-draw kasi. I just want to have the common ones. This one is on the case of organic ha. So you will learn this in your organic chemistry class. So ito, cis-2-but-2-in and trans-but-2-in. Pareha silang butene. Ayan, pareha silang butene. Pero cis and trans. Ano yung pinagkaiba? We have this one, the position. Ito, the position nila. Itong sa cis, parehas yung CH3 nasa taas, yung hydrogen nasa baba. Ito nagkabaliktad. May isang hydrogen sa taas, isang CH3 sa taas and ganun din yung sa baba. So the same yan sila na molecule pero different yung kanilang structure. Different ang position. Yan yung tinatawag class na isomers. So sa sunod na lang ninyo yan pag-aralan. Let's have that in your organic chemistry. But nevertheless, I hope you know now ano yung tawag dyan. It's called isomer. Okay? Now, we also have allotropism. Sa chemistry class, we have chemicals existing in 2 or more conditions. Therefore, 2 or more conditions sila, magkaiba yung kanilang physical and chemical properties. Again, the property is called allotropism, and these substances that exist as that undergoes allotropism class is called allotropes. So let me give you an example para mas maintindihan nyo ano yung allotropes. Example, carbon itself. Marami tayong class, conditions ng carbon. Si carbon pwedeng mag-exist as diamond. The diamond mismo na ginagawa nating jewelries are made up of carbon. But as you can see, ano yung kanyang property niya, di ba? Dati ha, kasi ngayon hindi na ito true. Dati, diamond is the hardest mineral that you can only break diamond using another diamond. So this is very hard. Okay? That is diamond. That's one allotrope of carbon. So si diamond, carbon lang talaga yan siya. Now, we also have you know this, we have the charcoal. The charcoal is also carbon. Pero as you can see, magkaiba sila. Condition, physical, and chemical properties. But they are made up of the same substance, carbon. And bigyan pa natin ng isa, the graphite. The graphite which is found on the lead of our pencils, yung pinangsusulat natin sa mga lapis natin, that is still carbon. So magkaiba sila lahat class ng physical and chemical properties. They have different conditions, but they are all made up of one substance, carbon. These three exhibit allotropism. Therefore, carbon class has a lot of allotropes. Ang tawag natin dyan ay allotropes. So, iba yung allotropes sa isotopes, ha? Si isotopes, the same element pa rin yun. Pero, ano yun? Magkaiba yung mass number. Si allotrope class, the same element pa rin. Pero, it has different form, different appearance, and different properties. Okay? Questions so far or clarifications? Are you still here? Mag-quiz tani next week. It will be a long quiz kasi that will be starting from the start mismo up to the last thing I discussed this morning. Wala? Wala yung question?
Ang quiz, ma'am, identification ng lahat.
Identification, enumeration, true or false, halo-halo na yun siya. Pero one thing is for sure, I'm not fond of having multiple choices in my quiz. There are times, pero most of the time, wala kayong makitang multiple choices sa quiz ko kasi yung multiple choices, nilalagay ko yan lahat sa exam. Okay? So, identification, true or false. Merong enumeration sometimes lang. Most of the time, it's identification. Okay? So, let's talk about orbitals if you don't have question anymore. When you say orbitals, this is the region in space in our atom where can we find our electrons. Okay? Doon natin makikita yung electrons. Yeah, tomorrow ipasa ang hard copy ng activity number 2. Bakit? Nasa din siya. Anong abot mo siya there? Supposedly nandun ito sa atomic structure. Ilipat ko lang siya. Anyway, na-define lang yun. Dinefine lang natin. Now, let's talk about our periodic table. I think I mentioned this in the laboratory, but I have to correct. Feeling ko nagkabaliktad si Dr. Reiner and si Newlands last time when I discussed this sa laboratory. But let's check later. So we have first Antoine Laurent Lavoisier. He was the first one to make the first true periodic table. Do you know that? Yep. Okay, can you check your notes? I think nalagay ko si Johann Dobereiner doon sa law of octaves. Nabaliktad ko ata. But please check. This is the correct one. Si Johann Dobereiner was the one who made the law of triads. So what he did was he grouped together the elements into 3. And this groupings class was according to their properties. So he observed that, example, lithium, sodium, and potassium behaved the same. They have the same characteristics or properties. So they are being grouped together into one. But it's triads, meaning by 3s. And it was John Newlands who made the law of octaves, wherein he grouped the elements together by 8. Okay, by 8 naman siya. And that is still according to their properties. Okay? Now, Mayer and Mendeleev, our periodic table nowadays, are actually arranged by Dmitry Mendeleev and John Lothar Mayer. That was his name, John Lothar Mayer. So yung groupings naman was according to their atomic weights. Okay, remember atomic weights or mass number? The number of protons plus the number of neutrons. That's how they group together our elements. So accordingly, the physical and the chemical properties are periodic functions of their atomic weights. Pero meron tayong periodic table that was arranged using the atomic numbers. Okay? The atomic numbers are the ones na ginamit sa pag-arrange. And it was Henry Moseley. Wait lang ha kay. I'm having tinnitus. Nag-ring ang ako ang ear. Okay. Sige, let's continue. Now, I also mentioned this last time. We have the period class or the horizontal row, okay, of the periodic table. So, ito yung pag-ganon, horizontal. And take note that we have 7 periods in our periodic table. And ano yung nire-represent ng period? It indicates the highest energy level or shell that is being occupied by the electron. Therefore, if the substance or the element is located sa period 1, it means meron siyang isang energy shell being occupied by the electron. This is the nucleus here at the center. If example, the lithium belongs to period 2, it means merong dalawang energy shell being occupied by the electrons of our lithium. So again, we have 7 periods, which means these elements belonging to the 7th period class also has 7 energy shells occupied by the electrons. And yung family naman or group, family or group is the vertical groupings ng ating periodic table. Anong sabi ko last time? Anong nire-represent ng family or group? Parang sinabi ko to sa lab. Ano nga yon yung nire-represent ng family or group natin? Vertical, patayo. Like group 1A, we have the hydrogen.
Grouping of elements.
Valence electron.
Okay, what
Basta
is that?
itong naay number, ma'am, nga same sila tanan.
Same sila tanan. Yeah, that is the valence electron. So ano nga yung valence electron? Yung, nag-ring dyan ako ear. Wait lang nag-tinnitus na sagto. Okay. Again, when you say family or group, this represents the valence electron. Yes, Andrea? You want to ask something?
I thought, ma'am, element. Sorry po.
Again, wait lang ka kayo, na-distract ko sa dalunggan nga nag-ring. Have you tried that? Kinamuring inyong dalunggan sa bakit? Anyway, again, valence electrons, ito yung nire-represent ng group or anong elements? Akala ko po elements. What do you mean? Ang family. Nasa family, we have the elements there. So just like this one. Isang family ito. This is the group 1A. Hydrogen, lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, ano sunod? Cesium, and francium. Okay? So ito yun, group 1A, ito sila, family A. And again, ang nire-represent ng number na yan, group 1, is the number of valence electrons. And when you say valence electrons, it's the number of electrons found in the
Outermost shell.
outermost shell. So, kung example, merong dalawang shells ang element na yan, yung electrons class na makikita dito sa outermost shell, kung ilan man yan, yan yung tinatawag na valence electrons. Okay? So, kung nasa group 1A siya, meaning yan, sa outermost shell nila, meron lang silang isang electron. That is also true for group 2A, Bemagka, Sir, Ra. Sila lahat class, merong dalawang electrons sa pinakahuling shell nila. So definitely hindi yan sila magkaparehas ng shell kasi magkaibang period sila, 'di ba? Magkaibang period. So example, itong nasa group sa period 2, like the beryllium, meron lang siyang dalawang shells. And sa outermost shell niya, since nasa group 2 siya, meron siyang dalawang electrons. So, yun yung meaning niyan. For group 2A na magnesium, pero nasa period 3 siya, meaning yan, meron siyang tatlong energy shell. Nasa group 2A siya, and that means dalawang electrons pa rin on the outermost shell. So, I hope by now, ma-identify nyo na. Period class represents the highest shells being occupied. So itong nasa period 3, tatlong shell. Pero kung patayo class or vertical groupings of the periodic table, valence electrons yun. Electrons na makikita sa pinaka-last na shell, okay, ng ating element. So the families class or the groups are divided into two. We have family A and family B. Yung family A, yan yung tinatawag na representative elements. Okay? Family A, representative elements. Makikita nyo, if you are going to look at your periodic table, makikita nyo yan dyan. May group 1A, group 2A, group 5A, group 8A. Pero sa gitna, meron ding group 1B hanggang group 10B. Example, kung makita niyo siya dyan ha, group 8B. So ang family A, ang tawag natin sa kanila, representative elements, and then they occupy the S block in the periodic table. The S block is this one. Ito yung S block. So family A yan sila lahat. And then dito, ito yung P block. So from 3A to 8A. Ayan yung inoccupy ng family A natin. Okay? And then yung nasa gitna, ayan yung family B na tinatawag or our transition elements. So if you're going to draw again the periodic table, yung nasa gitna class, dito, transition elements. This one is the D block, mga transition metals natin. And yung F block class yung nasa baba, nakaseparate na nasa baba. The lanthanide and the actinide series, ito yung tinatawag natin na F block. Kasali yan siya sa family B or rare earth metals natin silang tawagin kasi nga rare talaga sila. Okay? Na meron pala ako dito ang periodic table. Ito yung S block before we'll end. S block, P block, all of them belongs to family A. So nakapasunod yan 1A, 2A hanggang 8A. And nasa gitna is our D block, F block sa baba. Ito silang dalawa, family B or our transition elements. Tawag natin dito yung nasa gitna, transition metals. Ito namang nasa baba, rare earth metals. Okay? Okay, questions before tayo mag-end? Next meeting, we'll talk about periodic trends. That will be the last one before tayo mag-proceed with other concepts in organic chemistry. So we will be having our quiz before that, starting sa slide 1 until dito sa slide 61. We will be studying 61 slides all in all, and we will have a long quiz. My long quiz means 30 items. Yan yung ibig sabihin pag nagsabi akong long quiz. Hanggang 30 points ako pag long quiz tayo.
Online lang, ma'am.